What if I told you about a lost city, a place forgotten by time, a place so incredible it could rewrite history? But it vanished. I've always been obsessed with secrets hidden in plain sight. What if the most amazing discovery was never meant to be found? Today, we're talking about that city, a city that disappeared. And halfway through, you're going to hear something that will change everything. Let's begin a journey of discovery to a forgotten wonder of the Inca Empire, Pac. High in the majestic Andes, at an altitude of over 8,800 feet above sea level, lies this strange and magnificent ruin. This place, where Inca construction techniques reach their zenith, surpasses even Machu Picchu in its boldness and mystery. Just setting foot here, despite the agony of altitude sickness, makes every hardship worthwhile. Before the Inca arrived, the land belonged to the Amaru, Mayu, Bois, and Antais tribes. They weren't known for building grand cities, but they were masters at transforming hillsides into terrace fields for agriculture. Then, around the 15th century, under Emperor Pachacuti, the Inca advanced into the region, bringing with them a construction technology so advanced it must have seemed supernatural. In just a few decades, from 1438 to 1472, Pac was reborn as a magnificent city, a living testament to their unmatched architectural genius. At Pac's highest point, on a majestic rocky outcrop overlooking the valley, stands a mysterious structure known as the Sun Tether, an ancient solar clock. Every year, at the solstice, it aligns perfectly with the rising sun, marking the sacred moment for rituals dedicated to the sun god. But Pac holds something Machu Picchu does not: a 500-year-old guinea pig farm. The ruins of this facility, known as GS, sit near the city's summit. The Inca placed great importance on these animals, using them not only for food, but also in their rituals. Even today in Peru, guinea pig festivals are still held, and the pet in your home may be a distant descendant of those bred here centuries ago. Pac also preserves the remains of fountains, aqueducts, terraces, and residential areas. The stone blocks fit together with such flawless precision that it's hard to believe they were placed there half a millennium ago. Through secret tunnels, watchtowers, and ancient cemeteries, you can still feel the presence of a civilization that once reached its pinnacle. Majestic and enigmatic, Pac stands resilient through time, a reminder that the talent of the Inca was far more than a legend. There are moments in history when the world changes in the blink of an eye, leaving scars that never truly fade. The Black Death, also known as the Great Mortality, was one such catastrophe. It was an invisible shadow that swept across the cities and villages of Europe in the mid-14th century, bringing with it a terror unlike anything people had ever known. In just 6 years, from 1347 to 1353, this nightmare claimed the lives of an estimated 50 to 60% of Europe's population. Families were shattered, entire communities collapsed, and a whole continent was transformed beyond recognition. For many who survived, the old world vanished along with the loved ones they had lost. But the devastation of the Black Death went far beyond the sheer number of dead. It shook the foundations of faith, shattered the established order, and left a trauma that lingered for generations. And yet, through all the pain, one question continued to haunt scholars, historians, and scientists for more than 600 years. Where did this pandemic truly come from? What was the first spark that ignited this wave of destruction? This remains one of the greatest mysteries in all of history, a riddle that only recently, thanks to the persistence of modern science, we have begun to answer. For centuries, the origins of the Black Death were shrouded in darkness. People only knew of the fields littered with corpses, the ruined cities, and the all-consuming fear that gripped an entire continent. But no one knew where this tidal wave of death had truly begun. And then, as time passed, the first real clue to this mystery appeared, not in the mass graves of Europe, but in a place almost no one would have thought to look: a silent stone slab deep in the mountains of Central Asia. bearing a single word carved into its surface: pestilence. The story of the search for the plague's origins is one of persistence and the combined effort of many generations. Thanks to archaeological excavations in the 19th century and the miraculous advances of modern DNA analysis, researchers have worked together to piece together the scattered fragments of history. Each generation left behind a trace, a small discovery, and together they have slowly unlocked the door to one of humanity's greatest disasters. None of those scientists could have imagined that the answer they had been seeking for centuries was actually hidden among the ancient graves of a tiny community on the fringes of the Silk Road. And it was here in this unlikely place that the journey to uncover the mystery would truly begin. In the summer of 1886, on the quiet slopes along the northern shore of Lake Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan, a team of Russian archaeologists began excavating two small cemeteries near the village of Karadzic. This was a remote land where time seemed to move more slowly, and the memory of ancient trade routes still lingered on every weathered stone. At Karadzic, the archaeologists uncovered evidence of a once thriving Nestorian Christian community that had flourished thanks to the bustling trade along the Silk Road. The people here were not merely inhabitants of an isolated village. They were merchants who helped connect East and West, bringing with them goods, culture, and stories that traveled alongside caravans across the desert. Beneath the tranquil earth of this burial ground, they unearthed dozens of tombstones dating from 1338 to 1339, nearly a decade before the plague was first recorded in Europe. Several of these gravestones, inscribed in ancient Syriac, told of something unusual: a large number of deaths occurring in a short span of time, with many stones citing a single cause: pestilence. This discovery was at first only recorded in the pages of archaeological journals, but it would turn out to be the first piece of a mystery that would linger for centuries. After the excavations at Karadzic, the archaeologists carefully documented their findings and transferred the remains and inscribed stones to a museum in St. Petersburg. Over time, these ancient bones lay quietly on wooden shelves in the darkness of the archives, and the pages of those archaeological journals gradually faded into obscurity among the thousands of documents from the previous century. More than 100 years later, the fate of these nameless remains would change unexpectedly, thanks to the curiosity of a modern historian, Philip Slavin of the University of Stirling in Scotland. While researching the economic and environmental history of the Black Death era, Slavin happened to rediscover the old archaeological records. What caught his attention was a haunting number. In just the years 1338 and 1339, that small community had lost more than 118 people, with many tombstones clearly listing the cause as pestilence. For a once prosperous trading community, this could not have been a coincidence. Slavin began to suspect that this might, in fact, be the true starting point of the pandemic that would one day transform all of Europe. But to turn this suspicion into historical fact, he needed something that previous generations of historians had never possessed: scientific evidence, specifically the genetic traces preserved within those ancient remains. When those ancient records were finally brought back into the light, it was as if history itself had been waiting for this moment. For the first time, thanks to the advances of modern science, humanity could directly confront a mystery that had haunted us for centuries. At the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany, teams of geneticists had been quietly working for years to unravel the genetic family tree of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the plague. They had collected and analyzed thousands of DNA samples, not only from ancient victims, but also from rodents and fleas all over the world. Through this vast trove of data, the scientists discovered that in the early 14th century, Yersinia pestis underwent a turning point in its evolutionary history. Suddenly, it split into 4 major branches, and one of those branches became the very culprit that unleashed the terror of the Black Death across Europe. This genetic family tree became a kind of map, tracing not just the path the disease had taken, but also pointing to where the nightmare truly began. With hope that the final answer was within reach, the geneticists began working alongside historian Philip Slavin, determined to unlock the secrets still lying dormant in the ancient remains from Karadzic. A quest for truth next led the scientists to the Peter the Great Museum in St. Petersburg, where the remains excavated from Karadzic had been stored for over a century. Here, the research team, in collaboration with Russian specialists, began their meticulous work. They extracted DNA samples from the teeth of 7 individuals' teeth, being the best natural vaults for preserving traces of infectious diseases that had ended lives so long ago. The wait for test results felt endless until finally, under the microscope and through modern genetic sequencing, the truth began to emerge. DNA from 3 of the 7 individuals revealed an unmistakable sign: the clear presence of Yersinia pestis, the very same plague bacterium responsible for history's most terrifying pandemics. What shocked the researchers most was when they compared these genetic sequences to the global family tree of plague bacteria. What they found was not some random, isolated variant. The genetic code matched perfectly with the ancestral strain that gave rise to every branch responsible for the Black Death and all the plague outbreaks that followed for centuries. At last, the great mystery had an answer. The true starting point of the disaster was not in Europe, but in a small community on the shores of Lake Issyk-Kul. Scientists turned to the next question: how and why did it erupt so violently and spread all the way to Europe? Studies of the climate and ecology in the region revealed that the lands around Lake Issyk-Kul had long been a natural reservoir for plague bacteria. Here, among endless steppes and rolling mountain slopes, Yersinia pestis quietly persisted, circulating through generations of wild rodents, marmots, large gerbils, and voles. All of them were natural hosts, living in vast colonies that tunneled beneath the earth and through the grasslands surrounding the lake. Whenever the climate shifted, when spring was unusually warm or rains heavier than normal, the rodent populations would suddenly surge. With more animals came more fleas, the most dangerous carriers of all. In this crowded environment, plague bacteria had countless chances to multiply, mutate, and eventually cross the boundary from animals to humans. All it took was a marmot hunted for its fur or meat, or a seemingly harmless bite from a wild rodent, to become the first link in a chain reaction one that would ultimately unleash an unstoppable epidemic that swept across the entire Eurasian continent. The graves at Karadzic tell not only a story of pain and loss, but also reveal something special about this community. They were not reclusive farmers. They were merchants whose trade reached across the expanse of Eurasia. In their burial sites, archaeologists found pearls from the Indian Ocean, coins from Iran, and rare Mediterranean goods. The people of this land were once a crucial link in the chain that connected East and West. It was these very connections that allowed the disease to slip quietly across borders. Crowded caravans moved along the Silk Road, carrying goods and countless pieces of luggage. Hidden deep inside cargo bales or in the crevices of wagon wheels, small but deadly black rats thrived, bringing with them hordes of plague-infected fleas. The plague followed these merchants, traveling more than 3,500 kilometers across mountains, deserts, and grasslands, eventually reaching the Crimean Peninsula and the port city of Kaffa in 1346. There, history would witness a new level of cold-blooded cruelty. During the siege of the city, Mongol forces hurled the corpses of plague victims over the walls, one of the earliest known examples of biological warfare. Not long after, Genoese merchant ships set sail from Kaffa, laden with goods, sailors, and unwittingly, plague-ridden rats. The Black Death floated west with the Genoese sails, crossed the Black Sea, and swept across Europe, beginning one of the most tragic chapters in all of human history. When the Genoese ships carrying the plague docked at the major Mediterranean cities, Europe unknowingly became the perfect breeding ground for this unfolding nightmare. At that time, the continent was like a bed of smoldering embers waiting to ignite. Cities were overcrowded, streets were narrow, garbage and animal carcasses piled up right outside people's doors, and rats multiplied out of control. In every alleyway, in every dark corner, black rats and swarms of disease-carrying fleas were ever present. No one knew what awaited them. One day, a neighbor was healthy, and the next, they had collapsed. Families were torn apart in the span of a single summer. The Black Death wiped out millions of lives in just a few short years, leaving behind abandoned villages, deserted fields, and ruined cities. But it did more than just devastate the population. The plague shook every foundation of society. Religion, law, and the very structure of the economy were forever altered in the aftermath. And even though centuries have passed, the memory of that horror remains deeply etched into Europe's collective consciousness, permanent testament to the devastating power of disease and the fragility of humanity in the face of fate. The legendary ship known as the Ruswick has finally yielded the treasure hidden beneath the ocean floor. More than 2,500 artifacts that have stunned archaeologists. This groundbreaking discovery occurred off the coast of Kent, England, where the wreck has lain silent for centuries. The Ruswick was a merchant vessel belonging to the Dutch East India Company, which sank in 1740, only 3 years after it was launched. Founded nearly 150 years earlier, the company had grown into one of the world's most powerful trading empires, dealing in spices and luxury goods, while profiting from the slave trade during colonization, a dark chapter in history. The Ruswick's final journey began on January 8th under the command of Captain Daniel Roner. The ship left the Netherlands bound for Jakarta, a trip that today takes only hours by air, but in the 18th century required 8 grueling months at sea. However, the Ruswick never reached Jakarta. It didn't even make it beyond Dutch waters before a storm struck, driving it onto the Goodwin Sands, where it sank off the English coast. From then on, it vanished from every map until an amateur diver named Ken Welling stumbled upon the wreck in 2005. For 265 years, the Ruswick rested beneath the sands, along with the 237 souls who perished on board. To date, only 20 crew members have been identified. The rest were lost to history. But the real treasure is what no one could take their eyes off. On the day it set sail, the Ruswick was packed with valuables cargo so rich, even pirates could only dream of it. Estimates suggest it carried around 300,000 guilders in gold and silver. The silver was cast in large ingots, while the gold came in Spanish coins known as reals. Yet the coins were not the most astonishing find. The excavation revealed not only precious metals, but also a massive cache of weapons, as if a medieval arms deal had gone disastrously wrong at sea. Inside wooden crates hoisted from the depths, no modern firearms were found, but rather 5 chests full of curved blades. Each sword was intricately engraved with symbols of the sun, moon, and stars. Some bore patterns of coiled serpents along the edges. These blades lacked hilts, like guns without ammunition, perhaps prepared for delivery to warriors in Jakarta. Not all artifacts withstood the centuries. Archaeologists also uncovered piles of stitched gauntlets, corroded and fused together into blocks that could not be separated without destroying them. From a distance, they resembled melted fragments of medieval armor. The Ruswick carried not only goods, but also a piece of memory, forgotten for centuries beneath the sea. Now, every artifact raised to the surface is more than evidence of a shipwreck. It is a fragment of an era where trade, war, and anonymous lives became one with the waves forever. From monumental architecture, our story shifts to something else entirely. The first weapon of mass destruction, known as the Hellburner. It was once used as a ruthless tool to annihilate the enemy. This was the age of wooden ships, when fire was the sailor's greatest fear, second only to the Kraken. Naval warfare was a terrifying dance, where ships and crews turned to ash in fiery seas. The Greeks were pioneers in this art of death. They didn't just launch flaming arrows or pots of oil. They built sacrificial ships packed with pitch and resin, then set them ablaze and sent them crashing into enemy lines. The result was devastating explosions that destroyed opposing fleets without a single Greek life lost. They went further, experimenting with mixtures of naphtha and quicklime, a substance so flammable it ignited on contact with water. As early as the 7th century BCE, these fire ships became history's first incendiary weapons, paving the way for future technologies of destruction. 2,000 years later, gunpowder emerged, taking the power of these ships to a new level. They were no longer just fire starters, but floating bombs. In 1585, the Habsburg army laid siege to Antwerp. Commander Alexander Farnese built a bridge across the river, cutting off supplies to force the city's surrender. He never expected the Dutch to hire an Italian military engineer named Federigo Gianibelli. Gianibelli promised to destroy the bridge, but demanded 3 large ships. He was given only 2 small ones and turned them into the largest bombs Europe had ever seen. Inside each vessel, he constructed a chamber 40 feet long and 16 feet wide, with walls 5 feet thick of brick and mortar. Into this, he packed 3 tons of gunpowder surrounded by iron shards, stones, and countless sharp objects materials that would rain down death upon detonation. One ship was set off with a slow fuse. The other used a mechanical timer linked to a flintlock mechanism designed by a clockmaker, the first-time bomb in history. The fateful night arrived. The first ship exploded weakly, producing only a faint boom, but the second barreled into the bridge and detonated with a thunderous roar that tore the sky apart. The ship vanished, the bridge collapsed, and 800 Spanish soldiers were killed instantly. Then millions of fragments of iron and stone rained down, leveling houses miles away. Military historian Robert O'Connell once called the Hellburner the first weapon of mass destruction in history. The world would not see another bomb of its kind until World War I, when British engineers detonated 496 tons of explosives. But that is another story. Once martyrs of the early Christian community, the catacomb saints were buried deep within the ancient underground passages of Rome. Centuries later, from those dark resting places, they were exhumed and sent across Europe, transformed into sacred relics tied to specific saints. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, a wave of iconoclasm swept across Europe, rejecting Catholic symbols and relics. Churches were stripped of their splendor, deemed too lavish, too wealthy. In England, King Henry VIII went further, severing ties with the Catholic Church to establish the Church of England under his authority. The Pope's power crumbled, and the Church fell into crisis. Amid this turmoil, the Catholic Church took a bold step. They began exhuming masses of remains from the ancient Roman catacombs, proclaiming them to be the relics of martyrs. Although most of these individuals likely played no significant role in the religious life of their time, each skeleton was adorned with gold, precious jewelry, and even suits of gleaming golden armor. These remains were gifted or sold to wealthy families as revered relics. Yet behind the glittering facade lay an ambiguous truth. Many of these saints may have never existed. In some cases, the skeleton bore the same name as the family that received it as a patron saint. It seemed to be a clever way for the church to transfer immense wealth, gold, gems, silver, and treasures out of its coffers without drawing condemnation. Jewels were even stuffed into the eye sockets of the skulls, crowns placed on their heads, and the remains installed in private chapels as sacred objects. Today, most of the catacomb saints have disappeared. Some remain on display in museums across Europe, while others are kept in private collections, a testament to a period marked by contradictions between faith, power, and opulence. In the Mexican state of Chihuahua, for over a year, Scientists have been digging deep holes across the desert, hoping to uncover traces of a lost civilization. Their persistence has finally paid off. Beneath the dry sands, they unearthed fragments of ancient pottery, stone tools, fossilized corn kernels, and beads made from seashells materials that could only have come from the Pacific Ocean, over 250 miles away. Most of the excavation took place south of Casas Grandes, an ancient city that flourished 800 years ago. Casas Grandes has long been a mystery because it was built in a desert valley with almost no water. Yet, its inhabitants managed to thrive. The city once supported at least 4,000 people, along with thousands more in surrounding settlements that have been buried under sand for centuries. Researchers wanted to trace the remnants of those vanished settlements. So they excavated across the valley. They searched for evidence of communities that had transformed this landscape nearly a millennium ago. Now, archaeologists confirm this was once home to a massive population, with numerous settlements extending beyond Casas Grandes. What puzzles them is why people chose to persist in such a harsh land. There appear to have been multiple periods of urbanization, suggesting that people kept returning, rebuilding, and continuing life on this desolate terrain. Clearly, they possessed some knowledge that allowed them to survive in these brutal conditions. Or perhaps they simply embraced a challenge no one else dared to face. In the Namibian desert, where sand meets waves, diamond miners stumbled upon a secret buried for 500 years, the wreck of a ship loaded with treasure worth an estimated $13 million in gold. The discovery took place in April 2008, when the De Beers Mining Company was working along the Skeleton Coast, an area notorious for its decaying shipwrecks. Yet, this ship was so extraordinary that it left archaeologists in awe. It lay under the old seabed within the surf zone, where desert meets ocean, a volatile area nearly impossible to excavate without modern technology. To extract it, miners built a massive seawall parallel to the shore, creating a lagoon. They pumped out the water, revealing dry ground, and there the wreck and its treasure emerged. Without digging a single additional ore vein, they found gold. According to Dr. Dear Newley from the South African Institute for Maritime Archaeology, the discovery was not entirely unexpected. Portuguese sailors once called this coastline the Gates of Hell, as its treacherous waters swallowed countless ships. Researchers believe the vessel was the Bom Jesus, which sank around 1535 on its way to India. On board were 20 tons of copper, a large stockpile of ivory, and a fortune in gold, all lying silently under the sand, waiting to be uncovered after half a millennium. In a remote corner of Asia, Chinese archaeologists experienced a chilling moment when they uncovered a mummy that underwent a shocking transformation in just a few hours. During construction work, laborers accidentally discovered a pit 6 feet deep, leading to 3 ancient coffins. When one coffin was opened, archaeologists were stunned to find an almost perfectly preserved body that had rested there for 3 centuries. Yet, its perfection did not last. Within hours of exposure to air, the skin began to blacken, a foul stench spread, and decomposition accelerated rapidly, as if the body had lived again for 300 years, only to wither instantly before their eyes. Dr. Lucas Nicol, an expert in Chinese archaeology at the University of London, explained that such preservation was usually unintentional. Unlike the ancient Egyptians, the Chinese did not perform elaborate mummification rituals. Instead, they mainly preserved their dead by placing them in large coffins and sealed burial chambers. 2 of the 3 bodies had decayed to skeletons, but the third mummy was astonishingly intact. The prevailing theory is that layers of lacquer and charcoal coating the coffin prevented bacterial intrusion, keeping the body in an unchanged state. But the moment the seal was broken, that closed environment collapsed, and 300 years of decay unfolded in mere hours. Although the dead man's identity remains a mystery based on his clothing, researchers believe he was a high-ranking official during the Qing dynasty the final imperial dynasty of China, which lasted from 1644 to 1912 before being replaced by the Republic of China. Even though it lasted only a fleeting moment, the event opened a strange new chapter in the exploration of the hidden mysteries buried in the past. In the Somali desert, scientists had discovered two minerals entirely new to Earth. They came from a massive meteorite that fell near the town of Lali. This colossal meteorite measured nearly 7 feet long, over 4 feet high. A small fragment was sent to the University of Alberta for analysis. In the electron microprobe laboratory, researchers identified two minerals never before seen in nature. Chris Hurd, one of the scientists involved, admitted he was astonished by the discovery. Currently, science recognizes only about 4,000 minerals, so the addition of two new ones is a major event. While their uses remain unknown, the research team continues to analyze them and even suspects a third new mineral may exist within the meteorite. Amid the barren desert, this rock from space not only reveals a story of newly discovered minerals, but also evokes the mystery of its journey across the cosmos, ultimately falling to Earth to tell its tale. When does a mummy stop being a mummy? Perhaps when it's actually the victim of a modern murder. This strange question became the starting point for one of the most bizarre archaeological investigations in history, a mystery blending ancient artifacts with a modern-day homicide. It all started in 2000 when the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York received 4 Polaroid photos of what appeared to be a mummy. The curator, Oscar Muscarella, with his trained eye, found the details convincing. The photos were accompanied by a translation of an inscription said to be on the mummy as golden breastplate. It claimed the remains belonged to a Persian princess, the daughter of the legendary King Xerxes, the very same ruler who, as history tells us, once ordered his soldiers to whip the sea in a fit of rage. Anyone who's seen the movie 300 will recall Xerxes, adorned with piercings and a voice like thunder. Now, the supposed mummy of his daughter was before them, a priceless treasure if authentic. The museum couldn't ignore such an opportunity. Yet Muscarella hesitated. Something about the translation seemed off, small errors that raised his suspicion. The uneasy feeling grew, and he ultimately refused to purchase the mummy. For him, the matter ended there. But months later, Pakistani police arrested a man named Ali Akbar for illegal trafficking of mummies. It was the same mummy from the photos sent to New York. The case seemed closed, but it was far from over. A small fragment was sent to the University of Alberta for analysis. In the electron microprobe laboratory, researchers identified two minerals never before seen in nature. Chris Hurd, one of the scientists involved, admitted he was astonished by the discovery. Currently, science recognizes only about 4,000 minerals, so the addition of two new ones is a major event. While their uses remain unknown, the research team continues to analyze them and even suspects a third new mineral may exist within the meteorite. Amid the barren desert, this rock from space not only reveals a story of newly discovered minerals, but also evokes the mystery of its journey across the cosmos, ultimately falling to Earth to tell its tale. When does a mummy stop being a mummy? Perhaps when it's actually the victim of a modern murder. This strange question became the starting point for one of the most bizarre archaeological investigations in history, a mystery blending ancient artifacts with a modern-day homicide. It all started in 2000 when the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York received 4 Polaroid photos of what appeared to be a mummy. The curator, Oscar Muscarella, with his trained eye, found the details convincing. The photos were accompanied by a translation of an inscription said to be on the mummy as golden breastplate. It claimed the remains belonged to a Persian princess, the daughter of the legendary King Xerxes, the very same ruler who, as history tells us, once ordered his soldiers to whip the sea in a fit of rage. Anyone who's seen the movie 300 will recall Xerxes, adorned with piercings and a voice like thunder. Now, the supposed mummy of his daughter was before them, a priceless treasure if authentic. The museum couldn't ignore such an opportunity. Yet Muscarella hesitated. Something about the translation seemed off. Small errors that raised his suspicion. The uneasy feeling grew, and he ultimately refused to purchase the mummy. For him, the matter ended there. But months later, Pakistani police arrested a man named Ali Akbar for illegal trafficking of mummies. It was the same mummy from the photos sent to New York. The case seemed closed, but it was far from over. The mummy was transferred to the National Museum in Karachi and unveiled in a grand press conference as the remains of a Persian princess from around 600 BCE. The international media went wild. Iran reacted furiously, claiming the princess was Persian and therefore rightfully theirs. A heated diplomatic dispute broke out over ownership of what was believed to be King Xerxes' daughter. However, while nations argued, scientists at the National Museum of Pakistan began their analysis. At first, everything appeared consistent. The mummy lay in a wooden coffin on a reed mat. The coffin was decorated with a golden mask, and the breastplate bore an inscription reading, "I am the daughter of the great King Xerxes." I am Rotun, but soon anomalies began to surface. The inscription was riddled with grammatical errors, and even the princess's name was wrong. Rotun was a Greek transliteration. Her true Persian name would have been Warda. Researchers started to suspect something was seriously amiss. When radiocarbon dating was performed on the reed mat, the results were shocking. It was only about 50 years old, far younger than the 2,600 years claimed by the legend. The next step was a full forensic examination of the body. It was then that the horrifying truth emerged. The woman in the coffin was an adult, but she had died in 1996, just 4 years before the photos were sent to the museum. Forensic analysis revealed her neck had been broken, likely from strangulation. What was thought to be an ancient princess was, in fact, the victim of a modern murder. It was a shocking case in which a killer had murdered an unknown woman, mummified her, and then tried to sell the body as a priceless artifact. The scandal humiliated archaeologists and politicians worldwide. Pakistani police launched an investigation, but more than 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved. The killer was never caught. The princess mummy was tragically just a woman sold as a precious relic. Around 2,500 years ago, a mysterious civilization known as the Tartessians emerged on the Iberian Peninsula. They were a Bronze Age power with construction techniques that still baffle archaeologists. Their capital, Tartessos, was once a bustling port that attracted merchants from across the Mediterranean. The Tartessians had their own language, advanced metallurgy, and monumental architecture, as if they had appeared with fully developed knowledge from the very beginning. Studies show they maximized the use of local materials, building incredibly durable structures without the need for imports. Their labor was organized with a precision that resembled an early form of industrial efficiency. Yet, as quickly as they appeared, they vanished under mysterious circumstances. Were they erased by the rise of Rome, defeated by Carthage, or did they simply migrate elsewhere? The answer remains hidden in the shadows of history. In the vast deserts of Syria, an unusual mystery has come to light. In 2009, archaeologist Robert Mason from the Royal Ontario Museum, while surveying an ancient monastery, stumbled upon some strange stone blocks. They looked nothing like the monastery's architecture. Upon analysis, Mason realized these stones were far older, dating back nearly 10,000 years. His astonishment grew when further excavation revealed more stone structures scattered across the surrounding desert. They appeared to have been used as animal traps during the Neolithic era. Thousands of years ago, this now barren land was lush and fertile, a perfect place for early humans to hunt and settle. The monastery where Mason made his discovery is called Dir Mar Musa. Built around the 4th century, it survived until the 19th century when an earthquake destroyed it. It was only restored and reactivated in the 1990s. Mason believes the history of this site stretches far deeper than recorded, possibly having served as a Roman watchtower, guarding the desert near Damascus before becoming a monastery. The so-called mummified figures at Pompeii paint a chilling picture of history's most infamous natural disaster. But the stone-like forms that tourists see among the ruins are not the intact remains people believe them to be. Despite drawing 3 million visitors a year, few know the truth behind them. On a late October day in 79 CE, Pompeii faced its apocalypse. To the city's wealthy inhabitants, it may have seemed as though the gods themselves had delivered divine punishment. Mount Vesuvius erupted just 5 miles away, engulfing the area in a superheated cloud of toxic gas, while lava and burning ash rained down like fire from the sky. What remains today are the iconic stone bodies that appear to be frozen by Medusa's curse. But the reality is far different from popular belief. Many assume Pompeii's residents screamed as molten lava consumed the city, turning them into eternal statues. But the truth is otherwise. Before the 19th century, anyone visiting Pompeii would not have seen a single body. Professor Mary Beard of Cambridge University explains that these stone figures are not mummies at all. They are hollow casts shaped like human bodies. Over centuries, the flesh decayed and the clothing disintegrated, leaving empty spaces shaped like human forms. By pouring plaster into these cavities, archaeologists created exact replicas of the victims' final moments. Mary Beard calls these figures antibodies because they are merely molds of where human bodies once were. These casts were later placed around Pompeii to attract visitors who, with innocent eyes, believe they're standing before real mummies when in fact they're only hollow shells of plaster. A chilling discovery in Oregon has revealed a dark secret about ancient warrior training. Archaeologists found miniature versions of ancient weapons that at first puzzled them. Now that they understand their purpose, experts are still unsettled. It seems native warriors were trained from a very young age. Salish and Chinookan-speaking people in Oregon appear to have been far more like Spartan warriors than anyone imagined. Researcher Robert Losey from the University of Alberta uncovered numerous atlatl spear-throwing devices during excavations along Oregon Seas, dating back around 1,200 years. An atlatl is a long shaft, roughly the length of an arm, that dramatically increases the power and range of a spear. Much like a modern dog ball launcher, with an atlatl, a spear becomes far deadlier, easily piercing enemies. Robert argues this made sense because the weapon is not easy to master and requires long practice. Smaller versions allowed children to start training early. But who would dare trust an 8-year-old with a weapon capable of killing? Of course, the atlatl was not only for combat. It was also an essential hunting tool critical for survival. In reality, what Ernst Wegerer saw may have been a type of round artifact crafted in China from the Neolithic period to the early modern era. Some are 5,000 years old, made of jade, glass, or even granite, and buried underground. Minerals in the soil could make them appear far older than they truly are. Many experts believe what Wegerer saw at the Banpo Museum were just ordinary bai. Perhaps what Chipu Te found in the Bayan Har Mountains was the same. The alien story may simply have been added later. The question remains, are the Dropa stones real? Are they ordinary artifacts or proof of extraterrestrial life? In northern Sudan, on the eastern bank of the Nile River, lie the ruins of old Dongola, a silent witness to a once powerful kingdom. This city was the heart of the Kingdom of Makuria, a dynasty that rose in the 5th century after the fall of the Kushite Empire of Nubia. The Kushites were master builders, leaving behind the majestic pyramids of Nubia, many of which still stand at the ancient city of Meru. After their empire declined, Makuria inherited their legacy, transforming Old Dongola into one of the most important cities of medieval East Africa. Built on the remains of a ruined fortress, Old Dongola grew strong and reached its peak during the 10th and 11th centuries. Around its ancient walls lived nomadic communities, while inside the city rose palaces, giant churches, and an industry that served the caravans crossing the trade routes. The kingdom of Makuria lasted longer than the Ramang Empire, maintaining its power until the 14th century. However, when Arab armies advanced, Old Dongola began to weaken. The Black Death that followed wiped out much of the population, leaving the city drained and forgotten. Today, only sand-covered ruins remain, telling the story of a once brilliant civilization. Can a piece of trash change history? The answer depends on what you choose to believe. In 1961, Wallace Lane and two friends were searching for geological specimens near Olancha, California. They brought home several geodes to study. Inside one of them, they discovered something inexplicable. Encased in the rock, like a fossil, was a ceramic cylinder with a shiny metal core. It looked exactly like a spark plug. The three amateur collectors were baffled because, according to analysis, the geode was at least 500,000 years old. When a rock is no longer just a rock, things get strange. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, and theories exploded. One popular idea was that they had unearthed a piece of prehistoric technology, evidence of an ancient civilization that used modern tools like car spark plugs 500,000 years ago, only to vanish for unknown reasons. However, in 1999, a skeptical team X-rayed the artifact. The results showed it was in fact a spark plug manufactured in the 1920s with some corroded metal parts. It had never been inside a geode, but rather stuck inside some hardened old debris. Even with X-ray images as proof, not everyone was convinced. Some still believe someone is hiding the truth about humanity's ancient history. It sounds unlikely, but it does make for a fascinating conspiracy theory. Sometimes when people dig a hole, they uncover far more than they expect. Archaeologists in Norway have been investigating a skeleton found at the bottom of a well inside an ancient castle. Although this discovery was first recorded in 1938 at Sverresborg Castle, the body was not exhumed until 2016, and only now have the DNA test results been officially released. The conclusion is astonishing. The man in the well is mentioned in the Saga of the Kings, an ancient Norse prose chronicle. Research determined he died in 1197, likely during an attack on the castle, which at that time was under the control of King Sverre of Norway. The events surrounding this battle were recorded in the Saga of the Kings, written about a century later. For anyone familiar with Norse sagas, this is a groundbreaking discovery. Never before has a body from these legendary texts been found in real life. The saga describes the power struggles of King Sverre Sigurdsson and the brutal wars of the late 12th century. In an assault in 1197, the saga recounts that a man was killed and thrown into a well to poison the water supply. The dating of the body perfectly matches the account in the legend. This discovery proves that sometimes ancient myths are not just stories. They are buried clues waiting for someone to uncover them. On the remote peaks of California's Santa Lucia Mountains, an ancient mystery has lingered for centuries. Those who venture into this land often report an unsettling presence. Tall, shadowy figures known by a haunting name, the Dark Watchers. They are most often seen at twilight, as the last light of day fades behind the mountains. Witnesses describe them as unnaturally tall, cloaked figures wearing wide-brimmed hats, standing motionless on ridgelines like soulless statues. Some claim they reach nearly 10 feet in height, exuding an ominous aura. When noticed, they simply stare down silently, then vanish into the mist as if they were never there. Sightings continue to this day, but the legend is not new. Over 300 years ago, when Spanish explorers first set foot here in the 18th century, they too encountered strange phenomena. They called these beings Los Vigilantes Oscuros, the Dark Watchers. According to folklore passed down by native communities and early settlers, the Dark Watchers have been there since before humans arrived. From the high ridges, they silently observe every movement below, never approaching, never harming, just watching. Even the famous American author John Steinbeck mentioned them in his 1938 short story Flight. Steinbeck describes a character spotting a dark figure standing on a mountain peak, gazing down as if delivering an unspoken warning. No one knows what these beings are, where they come from, or where they go. Those who have seen them are advised to ignore them completely and never show curiosity. Who are they? Some scientists believe they are nothing more than optical illusions, a trick of the mind, like seeing dragons in clouds or faces on the surface of the moon. Others suggest they are simply elongated shadows cast by the setting sun, mistaken for giant figures. Yet hikers and mountaineers continue to report eerie silhouettes lingering motionless atop Santa Lucia's peaks. Forms no one can explain, always tightening the heart of anyone who dares to look. Are they just a product of human imagination or remnants of an ancient reality, still silently watching humanity from above, waiting for something no one dares to understand? The answer remains a chilling void amid the endless wilderness. What if these tiny stones are the missing link between ancient tools and modern technology? Archaeologists have yet to agree whether they are merely decorative pebbles or one of the oldest technologies ever invented. These mysterious stones, barely larger than pebbles, were discovered at an archaeological site in Israel. Each has a hole drilled through the center. The real question is, what was the hole for? Around 12,000 years ago, humanity was undergoing a dramatic transformation. The world's first temples were being built in Turkey. Technology was exploding. From crude stone tools, humans began crafting devices that would change everything, like the wheel. But these were not chariot wheels or potter's wheels. One of humanity's earliest rotating tools was the spindle whorl, a small disc with a hole in the center. A wooden shaft was threaded through the hole, and spinning the disc made the shaft rotate far faster than by hand. Attach fibers to it, and you could spin thread at incredible speed. Thanks to this technique, ancient people cut the time it took to spin fibers. The spindle may seem simple, but it was the starting point of a technological chain. From it, the wheel evolved, and thousands of years later, humans gripped steering wheels to drive into their own future. Returning to the Israeli stones, experts suspect they may be prehistoric spindle whorls, but no one is certain. After all, only a few perforated stones have been found, and researchers hope they are not just accidentally drilled pebbles. If true, these may be humanity's first wheels, a small invention that set the course of human progress spinning forward. Secrets from the Maya hieroglyphs. In an ancient plaza of the Maya city of El Palmar, Mexico, near the borders of Belize and Guatemala, archaeologists have uncovered a monumental structure rising 69 feet into the sky, a stone staircase with 62 steps covered with more than 1,250 carved stones. On each stone are intricate hieroglyphs, over 2,200 characters in total, making this the longest Maya text ever discovered. For centuries, no one could understand these inscriptions until recently, when the text was finally deciphered. It revealed a story steeped in politics and tragedy. Around 1,300 years ago, a Maya diplomat named A.J.Y. Yol undertook a crucial mission to broker an alliance between two great powers at the time, the King of Copan in present-day Honduras and the King of Calakmul in today as southern Mexico. The journey was grueling. He traveled more than 350 miles through dense jungles and treacherous terrain to complete his task. Yet, The political alliance he worked so hard to forge ultimately failed. As a result, AJY Yole lost his chance at advancement, was pushed out of the circle of influence, and faded into obscurity. The hieroglyphs on the steps are not just the record of a broken alliance. They are a bitter reminder of how politics and time can overturn the fate of an individual, especially one outside the royal bloodline in the Maya post-classic era. A.J. Woe's life thus becomes one of the rare examples shedding light on the non-royal elite, a class often forgotten by history. He inherited the role of diplomat from his father, spending his life traveling across Maya city-states, carrying a flag to signify his status. At the end of his life, he was buried in a small chamber beside a stone platform, a sacred structure he had commissioned himself, reserved for the elite to conduct rituals before the eyes of the community. Though he bore the title of an elite, his bones and teeth show signs of disease and malnutrition, likely beginning in childhood. In his grave, only 2 simple ceramic vessels were found, no jewelry, no treasures. As an adult, he also suffered from heart and dental disease, his health gradually deteriorating. In a statement, lead researcher Kenichiro Tsukamoto summarized A.J.Y. Yole's story with a poignant observation. Many people assume elites lived lives of privilege and comfort, but the truth is often far more complex. Life is never simple, no matter who you are. And so on the stone steps of El Palmar, deep in the jungle, the story of a man who climbed toward glory, only to be swept away by the tides of history remains etched in hieroglyphs, carved in stone and preserved in the silence of time. Thousands of years ago, humans faced the brutal heat of the desert, but Persian engineers found a way to survive. They built yakos, massive ice pits that functioned as natural refrigerators. A yaka wasn't just a pit. It was a domed structure rising from the sand, with a deep underground chamber for storing ice and food. The Persians used a waterproof insulating mortar made from clay, sand, goat hair, ash, and lime. Water from mountains or underground kanat channels flowed into the pit. Cool air was drawn in, and hot air was pushed out, creating a natural cooling system. At night, when temperatures dropped, water froze, and the ice was stored for the scorching months ahead. This allowed food to stay fresh in water to remain cold in an age without electricity. Other civilizations developed similar technologies. India stored ice on mountaintops. China used underground ice cellars, and ancient Rome preserved snow for cooling. Yagkas have stood for over 2 millennia, a testament to the timeless ingenuity of the ancient Persians. Today, researchers view these designs as inspiration for sustainable solutions in the future, particularly in arid regions such as the American Southwest and parts of China. In 1998, pilot Trey Smith was flying over Australia's outback when he saw something unbelievable. On the dry red earth lay the outline of a giant hunter holding a boomerang, carved directly into the ground. This was no illusion. It was the Murray Man, a geoglyph so enormous it stunned the world. The figure is colossal, 2 miles long, with a perimeter of 17 miles, carved 12 inches deep and 15 feet wide. Every detail, from the boomerang to scars, a headband, and even male genitalia, was rendered with astonishing precision. Created in what appears to have been absolute secrecy, unlike the ancient Nazca lines of Peru, this geoglyph is not old. Satellite images confirmed that Murray Man appeared suddenly between May 27th and June 5th, 1998. Just weeks later, pilots began reporting the mysterious drawing. Creating such an immense and precise figure would have required heavy machinery, GPS technology, and significant time. Yet no one saw or heard anything unusual. The only clues were strange faxes sent to hotels and local newspapers, promoting the geoglyph as a tourist attraction. The wording in the faxes was distinctly American, using miles instead of the Australian kilometers. Could an American have secretly created this? Nearby, strange objects were found, a plaque featuring the U.S. flag and Olympic rings, along with a glass jar containing aerial photos of the drawing. Was this an elaborate prank, a cultural tribute, or something else entirely? Some theories suggest Aboriginal groups created Maori Man to honor their heritage, but local communities rejected this idea, calling it offensive to sacred land. One name frequently mentioned is Bardius Goldberg, an artist from Alice Springs with a passion for Aboriginal culture. Rumors say he was paid $10,000 for a project and confessed on his deathbed to being the creator. If true, why didn't he reveal it earlier? Was he afraid of legal trouble? And how could he have done it without anyone noticing? In 2016, locals restored the fading lines, but the mystery of Maori Man remains unsolved. Goldberg may be the most likely suspect, yet the question lingers. Was this a wild art project or a cultural homage? In Scotland, what many believe to be the body of the Loch Ness Monster recently washed ashore, shocking the public. The first person to see the gruesome sight was a man walking his dog. Images of the carcass spread quickly online, showing a dissected body lying amid police tape. Its shape perfectly matched the legendary Nessie, a creature said to have lurked beneath the lake's waters since 1933. The news stunned many. Some believed it was Nessie. Others thought it was the monster's offspring. There is a special place in Wales where history and engineering stand, side by side. Conwy Castle and the Conwy Suspension Bridge, rising along the banks of the River Conwy. This nearly 800-year-old castle looks like something straight out of a fairy tale, with its soaring watchtowers and thick stone walls that silently whisper of battles long forgotten. It was the work of King Edward I, also known as the Hammer of the Scots, who spent a staggering £15,000 in the 13th century to build this masterpiece. That was a truly massive sum for the time. After conquering Wales, Edward I made the castle the center of the walled town of Conwy. For centuries, it served as both a crucial stronghold and a royal refuge, sheltering historical figures like Richard II, and even serving as a base for the national hero Owain Glyndwr. However, by 1665, the castle had fallen into ruin, its iron and lead stripped by locals, much like people today might strip copper from abandoned buildings. Connected to the castle is the Conwy Suspension Bridge, a marvel of 19th century engineering. Though not as ancient, the bridge, built by engineer Thomas Telford in 1822, was one of the first suspension bridges in the world. It was completed at a cost of £51,000, many times the amount spent on the castle itself. Telford designed the bridge to perfectly harmonize with the castle's architecture, so much so that passers-by might think both were born in the same era. An 1840 painting shows the newly completed bridge leading directly into the castle ruins, a perfect union of two very different ages. On the Iberian Peninsula, archaeologists have unearthed evidence that is forcing us to rethink everything we know about Neanderthals. It turns out that 65,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens set foot in Gibraltar, Neanderthals built a factory. And what they produced wasn't weapons or intricate tools, but glue. This discovery reveals that Neanderthal technology was far more advanced than we once believed. Inside the cave where the find was made, researchers discovered a peculiar fire pit, unlike any typical hearth. It was perfectly round, about 9 inches across and 4 inches deep, with vertical walls. 2 small channels extended from either side, showing that this was no accident, but a deliberate design, possibly the first instance of precision engineering on Earth. Inside the pit, they found sticky resin, the glue itself. The fire pit had been built to control temperature, much like a medieval blacksmith would regulate their forge. The Neanderthals distilled resin from rock rose leaves, mixing it with bat droppings to create an adhesive as strong as modern superglue. They used it to attach stone blades to wooden shafts, making weapons, tools, and even applying it in stone carving art. What stunned scientists was the scale and precision of the process. This was no improvisation. It was an organized production system, a miniature industrial operation hidden in a cave. The image of a Neanderthal crouched by the fire, carefully crafting a mixture from twigs and leaves, emerges like that of a prehistoric metallurgist. They prove that tens of thousands of years ago, ancient humans weren't merely surviving, they were innovating. The Dropa stones are a series of mysterious stone disks, believed by some to be evidence of extraterrestrials landing on Earth. This might be a strange way to begin this story, but the truth behind them is even harder to grasp. No one has ever actually seen these stones. There is no physical evidence to confirm their existence. Yet the tale of these bizarre artifacts has persisted through time, half legend and half mystery. The story begins in 1937, when archaeologist Chi Pu Te led an expedition to the Bayan Har Mountains in China. There, the team allegedly unearthed 716 granite discs carved with tiny hieroglyphics. Their shape reminded observers of ancient mechanical components, as if they belonged to some lost giant machine. But according to Chi Pu Ti, that was impossible. He dated the stones to 12,000 years old, the same era as the world's oldest temple, Göbekli Tepe. Alongside the strange discs, the team reportedly found star maps and skeletons with unusually large skulls. Though their bodies appeared human, their anatomy seemed off, as if they belonged to a species not entirely of this world. From this point, the story becomes murky. The stones were said to have been taken to the Prehistoric Academy in Beijing, where Chinese archaeologists spent 20 years deciphering the markings. In the end, they allegedly concluded that the inscriptions told of an event predating human civilization, the crash of an alien spacecraft. According to the translation, extraterrestrials crash-landed in the Chinese mountains and could not return home. They died there, leaving behind messages engraved on the perfectly round discs. Unfortunately, no one knows where these stones are today. There is no record of their research, and Chi Pu Ti, the man who started it all, doesn't appear in any official documents. No birth records, no academic credentials, no university ever acknowledged him. Everything just told might be fiction, or perhaps it has been erased from history. In 1974, an Austrian engineer named Ernst Wegerer claimed to have seen two of the original Dropa stones at the Banpo Museum in Xi'an. When he asked the staff about their origin, he received no answers, but he did manage to take a few photos. By 1994, the stones had vanished from the museum. The photos were too poor in quality to show the markings and were later identified as ancient Chinese discs, which have a similar shape. It's clear they may not have been the Dropa stones at all. The story of the Dropa stones, it seems, remains a fascinating ghost of an archaeological mystery. A few even speculated it was the carcass of a giraffe. The truth soon surfaced, however. The body was a publicity stunt. It wasn't the real Nessie, though it was impressively realistic. The mystery remains over who staged it and why. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster has long been a treasure for Scotland, bringing in over $6 million annually in tourism revenue. It's no surprise the myth is continually fueled, with many still convinced Nessie is the last surviving plesiosaur, a marine reptile thought to have gone extinct in the Jurassic era. Each year, thousands of visitors flock to Loch Ness, hoping for a glimpse of the creature. Ironically, this fake carcass only intensified the curiosity, making people even more eager to uncover what truly lies beneath the lake's still waters. A secret perhaps yet to be revealed. In the barren desert of Al Jauf province, Saudi Arabia, archaeologists have uncovered something extraordinary. Camel carvings so lifelike they seem to step out of the rock. Discovered in 2018, they were initially thought to be about 2,000 years old, based on similarities with other carvings in the region. But recent studies revealed a stunning truth. These carvings date back 7,000 to 8,000 years. making them the oldest known three-dimensional animal sculptures in the world, predating Egypt's pyramids and even Stonehenge. These were no crude etchings. The camels were carved directly into natural rock faces, creating a stunning three-dimensional effect. Some are so large, they would have required scaffolding to complete. Despite millennia of erosion, their detail and realism remain striking. Some even depict unique features like swollen necks or pregnant bellies, suggesting ties to fertility rituals. At that time, tools were made only of stone. How did they create such monumental works? Technical analysis confirmed the carvings were shaped with simple stone tools, proving they belonged to the Neolithic period. By studying erosion patterns and geological layers, scientists confirmed their age, turning speculation into fact. 7,000 years ago, this land was not desert, but lush grasslands filled with lakes and wildlife, including camels. The people who lived here were herders, hunters, and gatherers, deeply connected to their environment. They also built massive rectangular stone structures called mastodons, thought to be sites for animal sacrifices. Over 1,000 mastodons have been found scattered across the desert, showing this was once a cultural and spiritual center. The creators of the camel carvings left no written records, but their art and monuments tell the story of a skilled, organized, and thriving community. The precision and scale of these works prove they were not merely surviving, they were flourishing. Nicknamed the hobbits for their unusually small stature compared to modern humans, Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis are two extinct species, long considered distant relatives of ours. However, new research suggests another possibility. These species may be more closely related to us through interbreeding with Denisovans, an extinct human lineage closely related to Neanderthals that once mixed with the ancestors of modern humans. Scientists discovered high levels of Denisovan DNA in modern populations across Southeast Asian islands, indicating that the ancestors of Papuans and South Asians once interbred with a Denisovan branch. This raises a bold hypothesis. Could Homo floresiensis or Homo luzonensis, or both, actually be a southern Denisovan? These two hobbit species disappeared about 50,000 to 60,000 years ago, long after modern humans began leaving Africa. The overlap in time and geography makes interbreeding entirely plausible. This might also explain the puzzling absence of Denisovan fossils in areas where their DNA still lingers in modern humans. Still, decoding the complex genetic web of ancient humans remains full of unknowns. Not all scholars agree with this hypothesis. Some argue that the presence of Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis in Southeast Asia from 1 million to 700,000 years ago is too early for them to be Denisovans. The true origins of these hobbits remain unresolved, but every new discovery opens another window into the mysterious evolutionary story of humanity. Who would have thought a desert workshop concealed technology that seemed almost magical? Over 6,500 years ago, ancient metalworkers built advanced copper-smelting furnaces that were centuries ahead of their time. The story began in 2017 when archaeologists uncovered the remains of a copper smelting workshop in the Negev desert. These were not primitive fire pits. They were high-tech furnaces of the ancient world. Unlike earlier portable crucibles, this industrial-scale furnace allowed for efficient copper production, ushering in a new era of metallurgy. Professor Erez Ben Yosef of Tel Aviv University likens these metalworkers to sorcerers. They possessed complex techniques to transform raw copper ore into pure copper ingots and ceremonial artifacts. They were not mere craftsmen. They were an elite class operating in closed groups, guarding their secrets like medieval European alchemists. To decode their methods, scientists analyzed furnace fragments, slag, and crucibles. Each workshop had its own formula, sparking intense competition. Clues to their products appeared as early as the 1960s when archaeologists discovered the Nahal Mishmar hoard, around 400 copper artifacts likely originating from these very workshops. These findings prove that ancient people not only survived in the desert, they mastered technology, creating wonders once thought possible only in legend. Did humans set foot on the moon as early as 2309 BCE? How could they have reached it more than 4,300 years ago? And why did it take so long to return? Ancient records appear to challenge everything archaeologists, historians, and astronomers believe about humanity's ability to travel through space in ancient times. At the start of the 20th century, almost no one believed it was possible for humans to leave Earth. In 1926, Professor W. Bickerton declared that flying to the moon was both foolish and impossible. In 1935, astronomer F.R. Moulton stated that mankind would never enter outer space. As late as 1957, Dr. Richard van der Riet Woolley called the idea of space travel utter nonsense. Yet only 8 months later, the Soviet satellite Sputnik orbited the Earth, proving them all wrong. However, ancient records tell a very different story. In 1725, archaeologist Duparc claimed to have discovered massive stone blocks, a ruined pyramid, and a blue porcelain tower in northern Tibet. Nearby, he reported finding the remains of a royal palace with 2 thrones, one engraved with the sun, the other with the moon. Beside the thrones, he said he saw a massive milky white stone, believed to be a fragment of rock from the moon. In 1952, a Soviet expedition confirmed this account after meeting Tibetan monks. They were shown ancient texts that asserted the stone truly came from the moon. Could humans have reached the moon in prehistoric times? Evidence from various cultures suggests this might be possible. In Japan, clay figurines have been found that resemble modern spacesuits. In India, the Mahabharata epic describes flying chariots that emitted red flames. In Guatemala, ancient texts speak of a golden craft gliding through the skies. And in China, the philosopher Zhou wrote about a journey into the cosmos as early as the 3rd century BCE. Most astonishing of all are ancient Chinese records stating that in 2309 BCE, an engineer serving Emperor Yao flew to the moon aboard a heavenly bird, powered by a radiant current of air. The description is vague, yet it bears an uncanny resemblance to a spacecraft. Upon leaving Earth, he observed that the sun did not rotate, an observation only possible from outer space. This suggests he truly left the planet. Was this an advanced craft built by humans or technology from an extraterrestrial civilization? No one knows. Still, this ancient account remains one of the strangest pieces of evidence pointing to the possibility of space travel in antiquity. Whether or not Duparc actually discovered the moon rock, the scattered clues found across the world hint that humanity may have reached for the stars as far back as the Bronze Age.